Okay, so, well, Mary, welcome to Birmingham, first of all.
Yeah, it's beautiful here.
And I see you've already had a nice walk around the estate today and seen some of the exhibits here. So I think one of the things that we'd like to know about, people are obviously interested in upcoming trends, but also we're interested in knowing what companies do you think sort of are leading the way at the moment in terms of retail? What things, and can you tell us a bit about them and things that some of the businesses here that could learn about some of the leaders in retail?
Well, interestingly, look, I get asked all the time about, the future of retail and what's happening. I think to understand why certain businesses are leading, you have to understand how people are living, how people are consuming, and what's inspiring people to buy. That is the most fundamental understanding we have. Once you start to get your head around that, then you can shift away from the old codes, the way that we used to do things. And you'd be surprised at many businesses I go into, and they still will manage their budgets around the constraints of the way things used to be done. So here's the thing, we are changing the way we consume. The internet has been the biggest fundamental change to the way we live. There's nothing that's been like it at all in my lifetime, and probably within the next 50 years, 100 years, and it will get more and more sophisticated. What started to come out of that is that the internet and the way we consume, and whatever way that is, whether it's social activity, whether it's retail, has now become part of our everyday life. And so therefore, when we do buy from bricks and mortar, or we go into spaces, even like we are in today, we expect a higher level of emotional interaction. Otherwise, why go there?
Sure.
So what's happened, interestingly, is the big organisations, some of them like the Marks and Spencers of the world, that were so big, it's very difficult to shift that massive organisation to be nimble and to respond to a market that's changed ridiculously quickly.
Sure.
So I think some of the interesting ones have been what we call the pure players, the ones who started digitally, who are now coming onto the high streets and creating the bricks and mortar spaces of tomorrow. And whilst I'm not a big lover of Amazon, they're a bit like Tesco's, do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. No one really loved Tesco's, but they knew they were really good. I know you've probably interviewed them and loved them, but they didn't go to your heart. But they were very, very good until they stopped being very, very good. And we'll come on to that later.
Sure.
And then everyone went elsewhere to Aldi and Lidl because they were cheaper, because nobody actually emotionally connected with Tesco's. And the new CEO is trying desperately to get that back and doing a relatively good job. But here's the thing with Amazon, we don't really love them because they don't pay enough taxes and they're just so big, and Jeff Bezos has done everything. But when they opened up a bookshop in New York, it was so good. Let's not forget, 15 years ago, they said the bookshop was dying. One of the growths in retail today is bookshops, albeit rather small. And when you look at places like Daunt's and what James Daunt did in Waterstones, they just created spaces where you want to hang. And the byproduct is you buy. You actually buy. And they've just looked at the emotional feeling we have.
They make it convenient, don't they? Companies like Tesco and Amazon, it's almost too easy to buy from them. You can't help but go there. You just know it's going to be a quick, simple customer experience.
Yeah, it's kind of like a quick shag that's very quick, and you get it, and you kind of go, yeah, that was all right, it did the trick, but it wasn't exactly, whoa. And that's a lot of those.
But they deliver every time, okay. Yeah.
They keep going, don't they? There's a lot of those. So they are very, very functional, super functional. But here's the thing, when Amazon opened up their bookshop in New York, the simple things that they did that were just sort of like not revolutionary, and you go, how clever is that? And
give us some examples. What's a
one of those is
before the jewel's coming for us, but okay,
someone putting up a sign, no doubt. But one of the things that they did was someone's now hoovering. Stop the hoovering. One of the things that they did was, for example, when you go online on Amazon and you look to buy something, there's always a link to you'll like this. If you like this, you'll like this. Yeah. They've done that in the shop. So you go in, you get a bookshop, you've got fiction, and you go to buy an Ann Tyler book, and it says if you like Ann Tyler, you're also going to like Elizabeth Stout. you're also going to like, and they give you 5 books with a little intro underneath that's so bloody brilliant. You end up buying 4 books. Now, why have I not seen that in somewhere else before?
Sure.
Also,
do customers want you to be? Do customers want our retailers to know that much about us? Because that obviously means that they've been looking at all of our buying. They've been looking at all of the things. I mean, it's like with your Tesco Club card. When they go in there, it's almost like the Tesco or Amazon probably know more about their customers than sometimes the customers know about themselves. Do you think consumers are really aware of that? Have they thought about that, or do they accept that? Is that something that they want?
I think there's been a huge blind acceptance, and I think, you know, even this whole thing over Facebook with people going, oh, I'll stop. It's a really small minority who are saying I stop, because the social aspect of it is so good, and the social aspect of getting stuff that's pinged to you that feels really relevant, or going into shops that understand you, is a far cry from what we had 15, 20 years ago. When I did my high street report, you know, the government said to me, oh, we're sick of clone towns. That ain't going to happen again, let me tell you, and that's a good thing. Back in the 90s, every town you went to had the same shops on the high street. It was the power, again, of those retailers that spread their brands. Sorry, my thing's going down. Don't worry, Tony, mate, I'll be all right. It's just going. Who spread their brands, had the money to pay for those landlords, and they just colonised all high streets to the extent it was bloody boring.
Sure.
The minute the internet came along, it was their second door became online, and so they closed down all those tertiary sites, not giving a monkey's about community or what it did to the high streets, and they buggered off. And you know, the thing is, I think most people don't even really in their hearts, when they say those retailers have left, how sad. When you look at them, most of them are mediocre. Is anybody really feeling desperately sad about Toys R Us going? It was as boring as batshit. And that is the truth. I remember going into Toys R Us to buy toys for my kids, and ring up my pal, 3 kids go, let's have a little, you know, shopping trip. And it was like clinically depressing. Nobody actually understood how to market to children. And when you hear, oh gosh, it's because, you know, people aren't buying as much anymore, that's not true. They're just choosing to spend their money elsewhere.
The interiors of some of these shops, like Toys R Us and maybe should we say Woolworths, could be a bit drab, could be a bit low market. Give us some ideas about more exciting interiors, more exciting designs. Obviously, there's a lot of companies here in the sign and digital area, and they are looking to do cutting-edge things. Give us some creative ideas, things that you can help. What sort of shop do you think consumers want to walk into?
Well, it depends on who the consumer is. This is the thing. This is what we have to understand. You need to understand your market, really understand the people that you're connecting with, so that you create these spaces that they want to be in. If you are talking to a 22-year-old Z-Gen or a millennial, they're going to want something really different. So here's something. Buying sneakers. We talk about the footwear market. If you look at the footwear, the foot shops, shoe shops, that was one of the biggest demises ever. Where is money being spent on trainers, designer trainers? Kids are buying one after the other, sometimes not even wearing them. So I go to this little shop in Melbourne. It's called Sneaker Boy. You walk in, it's no bigger than, well, the size of the space that we're in now. They've got all these coolest sneakers designed on the shelf with these dudes, and I can only describe them as dudes, that are walking around. They sort of grunt at the young kids who come in, but they're the coolest kind of, you would imagine them being in the coolest bands, and they're sort of their jeans half hanging off them, some wearing shorts. They don't care how they look, but these kids think they're cool, right? And they go up to them. You see all the kids just touching these trainers like they're just these pieces of art. And they go up to these guys, and the guys have just got their iPads, and they can show them different designs that they have. And they order them. They don't keep any stock, so there's no stock room. There's nobody getting all sweaty and running out to serve you and take a ticket while you sit there in the most awful shoe environments that we've had to do. I won't mention certain brands. So there's none of that. They just sit there. You choose your designs, and then it gets delivered to your house, and the excitement of you opening up these trainers that you've kind of co-designed with these cool kids. Now the design on that is like something out of, you know, when Prada redesigned their shoe shops. with just beautiful shelves, the right element of lighting, like an art installation.
So it sort of sounds to me that you think the interiors and the exteriors of a shop should sort of reflect more the aspirations of the audience that they're trying to bring in there. It should just be sort of a place they really want to go, a place that excites them in some way.
Great creativity comes from understanding the people and connecting with you. That's what the best artists do. This is what we're going into now when it comes to visual merchandising, when it comes to signage, when it comes to creating environments that people want to be on. That is what the future's going to be. And the leaders are the innovators. The leaders are the people who understand that and actually understand it's about there just as much as it's about there. So you go into something like when Selfridges redefined itself as a department store, everybody thought department stores are where, you know, most people sedately went along in what John Lewis used to be 10 years ago. And they've done an amazing job on understanding how the women of John Lewis shop, and I say women because 80% of them are still buying their men's pants and their trousers. I bet your wife or your other half does the same.
That's true, yeah.
Yes,
okay.
So they connect it totally to understanding how women of England want to shop. And they created some incredible stuff in there, just service points where you can just talk to people and actually be guided personally. That's very different from someone who wants to buy online. So it's understanding your market. There is no one idea that's absolutely pertinent. You talked about Woolies. Like Woolies went down the pan. You're taping everything, aren't you? Oh God, I better be careful what I say. Anyway, Woolworths went down the pan and everyone went, what a shame, nobody needs that anymore. Nobody needed the bad way that Woolworths was doing it in the end. But here's the thing, the pound shop just came along and took that space.
Right.
And because what it understood is that value is at the heart of everything what we do. Everything. Woolworths, in its original heyday, was everything under one roof for a cent. Everything. They were the original pound shop, but it was a cent from America. But they lost their way, and they lost their way by too many people trying to work out what to do with the brand as opposed to vision.
Sure.
And some little market store trader came in, started the pound shop. Look at the size of that today. It's an extraordinary business.
Sure. You've talked in the past about putting the heart back into the high street. I think some of the things you've talked about, as you pointed at your chest, it's about this. Tell us a bit more from a practical point of view, from a retailer. How do they, if you like, put the heart back into their shop and therefore into the high street? How can that?
It just depends. It really, again, gets. There's a little restaurant across the road from me. 5 years ago, there used to be. It was called the Russian Tea Rooms, and everybody who lived in the leafy part of North London that I live in went up in arms when it closed and someone was moving in. They didn't want anyone new moving in. They'd all sat there, sipping a cup of tea that lasted 3 hours and paying very little. This restaurateur comes in, a woman, and she writes this note on the window just saying, I know you've all loved what's been here before, but I'm really going to connect with you as a community and I want to give you the best cafe that will be in London. I'm sourcing my product from here, all British farms. I'm sourcing my wine from here. I've got my chef from here. She wrote her whole history on the window. Right. I cannot tell you how many people read that. I cannot tell you how successful she is. On a Saturday and a Sunday now, there is queuing in the streets to get a table in her restaurant. What she totally understood was what that community wanted. They wanted to feel there was someone replacing them that understood.
So this lady, she actually wrote it with a pen or something like that onto a glass window?
Sign and digital.
Sign and digital people.
And now she gets artists that come in and she gets them every time the season changes to paint on the window, and she paints locals on there and she paints people's dogs on there, and everyone goes, oh, it's my dog, how cute. And they connect with it. It's that personal touch. So then you've got a sneaker boy at one end in Australia where they grunt at the guys that come in because the kids don't want to talk. They just want to be inspired by these dudes. You've got someone like her doing the personal touch. You've got John Lewis understanding Middle England women and how they want to be looked after, which invariably means a cup of coffee or a glass of champagne and some very nice person guiding them through fashion and telling them what's in. You've got Selfridges becoming a metropolis where it's a kind of urban metropolis and it's banging and everybody goes there. They don't mind if they're being bashed into it, feels that they're completely alive. You've got Amazon understanding how people buy digitally and that they want to just connect because that's how they buy when they buy their books online, and they can feel it. It's understanding how your customer and your people live and shop. Here's the thing, most big fashion businesses are run by middle-aged blokes at the top trying to second guess what us women want to buy. That's a very difficult place to be. and feeding shareholders.
And of course, you've advised a lot of these sort of middle-aged men running the businesses and so on.
No offence to middle-aged men. I mean, I like a lot of middle-aged men as long as they're creative.
Okay. But let's say
in government, a lot of them as well, don't they?
A lot of retailers, I mean, that you've mentioned, obviously, they've changed direction. What advice can you give to a business leader or to retailers about changing direction, about outlining a new vision? You've obviously helped people do that yourself. So how do you get sort of, how do you manage to convince them that it's time to change and then that this is the way?
It's all about real truths, and people go on about this, but invariably, businesses often lose their way when they've been sold, where they've been invested in, and people want to get a very quick return on their bucks. And you often see, you can feel the soul that's gone up. I mean, one of mine that just breaks my heart was the Body Shop, right? Look at what Anita Roddick did. In the 70s, she was talking about all the issues that are major now and are going to get sustainability, right?
Yeah.
Looking after our planet, looking after animals, animal welfare, how we live in the 70s. She grew that business to 1,200 shops with a vision. And in the end, all the boards and the men that took over called her bonkers and potty. She wasn't that bloody bonkers, was she? I mean, Christ, I'd be like that bonkers if I could make that sort of money. But she grew it because she believed it. And you always had those touch points when you went into that shop that felt you were connecting with the earth. I mean, when I was 15, that was the place you went to on a Saturday morning. You went down to the Body Shop. Sure. No offence to L'Oreal, they bought it out. What a brilliant organisation, L'Oreal. But you know what they did? They took the soul out of it. And they put systems in place. And they put organised systems when you look after a business that big. But what you lost was the understanding of this with people when they buy. So whenever I speak to businesses, whenever I speak to chief executives, whenever I speak to the people who are on a board and 10, 15 of them making a decision, I say you need to understand that creative leadership is vital to this. And you need to have just a few people who make those decisions. If they make them wrong, you'll know very soon enough.
Right.
But bureaucracy and boards where so many people have to make the decisions, it just kills creativity.
Let's talk about creativity some more then, because that's an interesting topic. This conference here has, over the last 30 years, has gone through immense change. And what you're seeing here, on one hand, you've got lots of very creative things, but then at the same time, you've got lots of very technical things, new technology. I wonder, is there any advice you can give to sort of bringing these two parts together? Sometimes, because sometimes your techies, your IT creative type people don't necessarily want to mix so much with the more artistic types. Have you had any experience of sort of managing to work them together, or maybe experience of where they just simply don't want to work together?
Well, I have a mix of them in my agency. I have 50 staff, which are a mix of techies, ITs, creatives, strategists, content makers.
Sure.
And the great thing of what we do is that we do bring them together.
Yeah.
Because that is the only way that this is going to work. This is about harmony. Customers don't shop by going, oh, I'm going to go around the technical route. Customers they get different touch points that connect with them.
Yeah.
Whether that's through their mobile phone, whether that's through messaging, whether that's through signage, whether that's through the most simple signage as you go into a supermarket that tells you that the fashion department's that way. All of these teams of people, there is no longer a split between the two, and harmonising them is going to be the future of how we work. It is the only way you work. And when you look at very, very good online businesses like Net-a-Porter, she disrupted that whole way of buying fashion because she brought technology and creativity together, and is a seamless way that they work together.
Sure.
And you have to have that. There's no two ways.
So how do you do it then? How do you get the very technical person to work with the more the arty type person? How do you?
Well, you need to think of the strategy. The strategic brief is going to be the most important part of that. So you set the strategic brief, and then you work with the teams together, sharing that strategic brief with the teams at the same time. You cannot silo it, and then you pull them back together each of them within their areas of expertise, coming back with the solutions, and then you make sure that those solutions have to work together. Another thing is also, we have one of those in my agency where we have, what would you do if you were MD for a day? What would you do if you worked in my department for the day? So we get people to do those job swaps so they genuinely understand how those other parts of the business work.
So you get
I'm
people
not very good at being a geek, that is for sure.
So who's in charge if someone takes your role? What do you do? What's your role?
Everybody has a go at my role. My role is I'm the chief creative, but everybody has a go at that because I think creativity is at the heart of everything we do. A creative thought, whether the end result is a technical one, whether it's a digital one, whether it's a three-dimensional one. Creativity is about expressing your work through whatever function that is. And I think it's wrong just to put creatives to the people who come up with great ideas. That is really, really wrong. That's why we end up with so many businesses just being dulled down. Creativity should be within everybody, and nobody should be in business unless they've got a creative thought. You always interview business people, entrepreneurs. They're creative, they come up with an idea.
Yep.
Aren't they? I think we could do this better. That's a creative flow. And then it gets suppressed when the organisations get bitter and you put the infrastructures in and everybody has to play these roles and you lose out. He's crossing off his little list of questions.
We're getting there. We're doing very nicely. But there will be time for questions, folks, so think up some if you will. You've obviously been a leader yourself and you've had to make some tough calls. Can you tell me about a time where you had to make a really hard decision and tell you how you sort of went through the process and how you finally got to the point where you made a tough call? Can you help us give us a bit of advice to some of the business leaders here about making tough decisions?
Oh gosh, I think I'm writing a book at the moment and it's called Work Like a Woman, and it's really looking at tough business decisions don't have to be alpha. We don't have to be ball breaking. Tough business decisions have to be stuff that are all linked to truths. If things aren't working out, how do you let people know that they're not working out? Is that what you're talking about, you know? Invariably, it's on people. The most tough business decisions are around people. And when things aren't working, how you deal with that. And I think that lots of the way that work has been built, not necessarily in the creative industries, that we're in here today, but a lot of business has been about alpha culture. I mean, even if you take something like The Apprentice, which is just the most hideous show on TV, it's all based on how you can belittle each other. Okay. It's all based on who's going to be the one with the biggest balls and the loudest mouth, not the person who's got there in the most creative way.
So when you say business decisions don't have to be alpha, you mean that the person at the top doesn't have to be horrible about it, or...
You just don't have to put on a different persona.
Okay.
The most important thing in life is connecting with who you truly are. We spend so much of our time in work. Why do we put on a face that is the work face? Why don't we bring our whole selves to work? And invariably, I remember when I was doing my High Street report and I was having this real debate with the minister, and he said, "You're too emotional." And I thought, what the hell does that mean? What, I'm emotional about the High Street and communities? Shouldn't you be emotional? Should I just be like you, a politician who lies most of the time to get through? No, but truthfully, that is it. I remember some great politicians.
Which minister was this, by the way?
I won't, but he's pretty high up now. but of course, he's known how to get to the top. So I think honesty is the most. Whenever I've sat down with someone who I was firing or separating from, I've said to him, look, that's the very first thing I said, listen, it's not going to be a great conversation, it's going to be difficult, but I think we're going to need to separate. It's the first thing I get out. So they're not sitting there, their little hearts beating, thinking what's to come. But I want to tell you why I think it's been an issue, and I really genuinely want to hear from you what has been an issue with you. But I've done the same with clients where it's not worked, where you just think this is just an energy that's completely different. How do we separate? And it's very difficult when they pay you a lot of money.
Okay, great. You mentioned Anita Roddick and sustainability. I mean, obviously that is a big topic for us all, for all businesses and that now. So how do you think businesses should be thinking differently? I mean, how are we going to become more sustainable businesses? Have you had any thoughts on that?
It's the only way you're going to have to be. I think diversity and sustainability, they're the only things you should have on your agenda. That is going to be the future. Right. All that's happened, we've had a complete collision of just trauma in the world. So in the last 5 years, there's just been a really, really difficult world to live in. From what's happening in Syria, to Donald Trump being president of the United States, to the stuff that's happening over Brexit, to all the possible questions over Ireland again, to all of this stuff has made, and it's often what comes out of it, has made a suppression, and people are now looking at how we want to live. and the good people are coming out and going, no more.
Yeah.
So even if you look at what's happened with the Me Too and the gender pay gap and diversity, no more, and sustainability in business. And it's not just going to be like, oh, we don't use plastic carrier bags, or this little t-shirt range we've got over there is sustainable. It's going to be truths that have to be done, the way that they work, the businesses. And when you take people like, oh my God, what's the American business? Patagonia. What an amazing business, where they started the truth about always giving back to the world. Everything that they created is sustainable. It's just an incredible business that's growing. And because every part about it is based on a vision that the original owner had, and it's kept completely. I mean, they did an ad once with, don't buy another coat, you don't need it, we can repair that. Imagine most brands telling you not to buy another one of their stuff. So even the sort of languages that we'll be using in how we market, it won't be telling people, it will be embracing people and connecting with them in a like-minded way, which is going to be so, so important. And you're going to be caught out if you're just putting a sign on that says we're sustainable.
But that really is a big shift for retailers, isn't it?
A huge shift.
Because typically most of these businesses, the people that these people are making signs for, and they're trying to shift product. They're trying to get the numbers out the door. Most of your clients want to get the numbers out of the door. So how do we get to that, if you like, the sustainable sort of world where, we literally have people saying, don't buy more coats, buy less products, repair things.
That was Patagonia, and what a clever, creative way we're doing. I don't think there'll be too many others that are doing that. And here's the thing. We shouldn't be embarrassed that we're selling stuff. I've spent my life advising businesses how to sell. It's how you do it.
Yeah.
And it's why you do it. And it's how you behave in business that's important. So of course the signage industries, of course all the businesses that are here are going to be thinking about how they create the signage, how sustainable they're being, how they support that. I mean, we're looking at digital, for example. Something like 40 billion advertising sites are in the UK. And we've seen a huge shift to digital on us. 40% now have become digital because the amount of stuff that we're just churning, and we have to think about that. So if you're in this business, how do you create stuff that is sustainable and thinks about the planet? But you've got to do it with the truth at its heart and not just this kind of speak. And I think the brands that will be found out are the ones that will go by the wayside. And the brands that have gone by the wayside are the ones that haven't put people at the heart of it. I was listening to the guy who brought Tiger over. What a great business. Anybody work with Tiger or know the Tiger brand? And it's a great business. And he just took a market that everybody thought wasn't going to happen anymore. Basically, really effectively, it's like a version of Paper Chase or a Ryman's.
Okay.
Everybody thought we don't need that, we're going digitally. And he just redid it. And he did it by putting fun at the heart of it. He did it by understanding values important. He's now looking at bringing over toys and kids stuff. And I heard him being interviewed on the Today programme, and they said, well, Toys R Us and Mothercare have gone down. And he said, yeah, if you're telling me that people aren't going to be buying kids' clothes anymore, or if you're going to tell me people aren't going to be buying kids' prams anymore, or nappies, then maybe I've got a problem. But they are. And what does that tell you? They just didn't do it good enough. And if you went into a Mothercare, no offence guys, but Jesus Christ, why could you not rebrand that business and putting family at the heart of it and love and having a child? I mean, God, the news yesterday on the new baby, bloody hell, everybody, people want that. That's an expectancy of joy. How did retail get that wrong?
So do you think, is the high street having such a tough time because things have changed because of online, digital, etc., or is the high street having a tough time because I suppose the big brands, your Mothercares and stuff, they haven't changed with the times?
It's a mix of it all. It's a mix of it all. We will never have the high street we had of the past. That's gone. There's no good being nostalgic about it. What will happen is we will have much more social places. Our high street will become the third space. With so much of what we can do online, we'll be craving places where we connect. Whether that's community spaces, where brands will be doing collaborations together, where you might have had one silo brand, you'll be having little restaurants mixing in with hair salons, mixing in with places that are selling pottery that maybe can't afford the ridiculous bloody rents the landlords still haven't woken up to and rather still have them sitting there empty. they'll be having supermarkets that will be over space, thinking about what can we do with those spaces, and maybe putting social creches and places at the heart of those. That's going to be our high streets of the future. And the brands that will come onto those, interestingly, we are seeing the return of the smaller, the independent, the rise in bakeries, the rise in butcher shops, where people are saying, I'm not going to drive out of town and do a big supermarket shop and load up. I want to shop locally. I'm going to go out more often, but I'm going to buy smaller amounts when I go out. There's been a huge, none of us would have predicted that that would happen. So you've got to understand how we're living. And once you understand how you're living, all the messages that you'll put around will be the messages that count, rather than the messages that you think you've got to do that will tell people why they should be buying. Those days are gone.
Just finally, what emerging technologies do you think are going to play a big part in retail over the next 5 years? What's exciting you at the moment in terms of the technological space?
Well, there's no two ways about it. You're going to have artificial intelligence is going to be the most important thing, because you'll be using AI in a way, like they've started this with Amazon. You go into the bookshop, you don't go to the counter, and you speak with someone, you actually pick it up, and you have AI, they'll pick up sensors that'll pick up what you've bought. You go to the next thing, another sensor will pick up, you leave, and you'll just get your bill onto an app, taken off your credit card. Now, not the most sociable experiences, but there'll be some people who want to do that route. There'll be others, like I went into Dawn Bookshop the other day and I actually nearly cried at the guy's feet. It was so brilliant. I popped in, I needed to buy a little gift for a friend of mine. I thought, get a couple of great books and some cards. And I stopped at the counter and he talked to me about the book I was buying. And then I talked about another book I was reading. He said, if you like that one, you'll love this. And we just chatted for 10 minutes. And he was so knowledgeable and so wonderful. And it was just the most beautiful place to be in. The place smelt of wood. It was buzzing. There were people just enjoying themselves, just connecting with this brand. Now that fed my soul, and I would go back to him anytime. But I will also buy books online when I need to do something quite swiftly. So it's understanding the pace and the way that we as humans, and I go back to that time and time again, want to connect, want to buy, and how we want to live.
Sure. And just finally, there was talk some time ago of sort of the creation of some Portas towns. Is that sort of gone by the wayside now? Are we going to see anything come through on that? Or
there was never a Portas town, God help us all. What happened was I put my proposals to the government, a white paper saying this is what I believe needs to be done, and the government took £1 million and gave some trials across, I think it was 15 towns, who ended up with about 80,000 each to rebrand.
Right.
What do I say on that? So,
simply not enough money, or
rebrand a town on 80,000. Oh yeah, no problem, hand it over. But no, it's never going to be enough. What we need to do is, this isn't just about that. This is about understanding placemaking. What are towns and high streets going to be of the future, and what are those places? Even when I look at businesses, we're working with brands and businesses where we look at places, what is tomorrow's shopping malls going to be? They will be a mix of where you live, where you socialise. You're looking at how people are living now. They're building flats in the old BBC building in White City. There's going to be flats. You'll have Soho House on the roof. You'll have your gym down below. You'll have the shops as you come in, but there'll be the shops that you need for eating that night and some restaurants to eat in. Placemaking of the future is part of the high streets. You cannot just take it and say, here's some dosh, go and have a go at opening up a new shop. It's understanding the way that different communities and the way that different towns will live, and understanding the different markets that live within them, whether they're ageing, whether they're youth markets, whether they're a mix.
Okay, terrific. All right, well, I think we've got a few minutes left for some questions. I'm going to put it out to the audience. Would anyone, if you could just raise your hand, if you'd like to ask Mary a question, and are we going to have a microphone?
Have I gone over time? I've got mine.
We've got a bit of time? Yep, I think she's coming for the microphone. So please raise your hand. Does anyone have any questions for Mary? Otherwise, you just have to have... we've got one at the back. Terrific.
Hi Mary, my name's Samantha. We own a family business in Tamworth, just down the road.
Family business that does what?
We're a coffee shop cafe. We sit
Give
on
yourself a plug, why not?
Thank you.
What's the name of your business?
Tamworth M42 Junction 10.
Okay, a whole town instead. Okay, great.
Sorry. We sit on a major retail park surrounded by every major national in the whole of the UK, and we are the only independent on a retail park in England, which we're very proud of. But how do I make us stand out against those big boys with huge marketing budgets?
So some advice for the indie versus the big boys.
It's quite a difficult thing, but I mean, like those with the huge marketing budgets, that's not what you're going to be. I think you should be taking the tips of my woman across the road. Use your creativity. What signage do you have out front? Where do they park? Do they pass by you? Is it about footfall that passes by? How are you connecting with those people that are going by? What about going into those big businesses and speaking to the managers and saying, I'll give a discount, or will you deliver people to my shop? I'll give them a coffee or a cake or a special promotion. Have you done that and gone and knocked on their doors? And what have they said? No. Head office. Huh?
We've got a staff discount for all workers on the retail park.
Okay, so the staff
That's
discount.
the staff. What about the shoppers coming in?
No.
Right, maybe think about that. But I think the thing is, if you're on the retail park and you're the only cafe, you're the only independent one, you've got to be able to think, how do I catch all those people that are going to these shops? And, because you're basically, it's like a supermarket. People are going in to shop for food and they want them to buy a coffee. They're all there, they've got their head on buying food. They've not got their head on thinking, I must go into the supermarket to buy coffee. How do you then connect to them? By being outside it, by creating signs or something that emotionally touches them. What's your promotion? What are you feeding that day? What have you got a special on? Who's cooked it? It's information, it's creativity. And what would make you want to go in there? Do you ever stand outside and say, why would I want to go in here? Maybe a good thing to do.
All right, terrific, good stuff. Any more questions then, folks? Anyone else like to ask Mary a question about their business, about how to get ahead? We have great stuff, okay.
Hi Mary, what's the one brand crying out for your help that you've never worked with so far?
Everybody asked me that one.
Trying to pitch for business, Mary.
I'd have loved to have redone Debenhams. I think I would have changed that completely. Yeah. I think, because that was a market where just too many departments. I mean, when I rebranded Harvey Nicks, we were the first department store that said, well, actually, let's put a restaurant, a really groovy restaurant and bar in it. Nobody had done that. I mean, it sounds so but it was the first, and so we made it so all the people that came through to drink and eat and socialise, we're all living within, X 5 miles, and that was money just coming through. Then they bought fashion, they bought beauty, and, I put artists in the windows, started the new generation fashion show, just looked at it in a new way and thought, how do we do this differently? And Debenhams needs to look at the towns it's in and say, why am I going to be the destination in this town, as opposed to thinking about the overarching brand, because there'll be too many shops with too many spaces. But I would redo that completely. Really tomorrow's retail. One of the things that I've done was, I know you said I'm an ambassador for Save the Children, but on my charity shops, I have now 23 charity shops, which are the most profitable charity shops in the UK. And all I did was make my charity shops not feel like charity shops. I just created places that were so cool, everybody wanted to be in them. And now they've become places where people are just swapping, donating. I get the most gorgeous people serving in them. I went in there the other day and I had a film editor of 28. And she had, a half a day, so she comes and serves in the shop. It just put the thing on its head. And I think we need to put tomorrow's department stores on the head because we've got too many. So probably Debenhams. And Marks.
What was that, sorry?
Don't put that one up. And they've got to answer to, shareholders. So they've got to go out and go, we're going to grow it. That's the biggest problem. Shareholders wanting their money, their dividends. How do you say stop? When Rosemary Bravo rebranded Burberry, she went, you're there now, they're making money, I'm going to take you there, and then you're going to go there. And it's a whole new rethink, a whole new reason.
Terrific.
I'd love to make a charity department store. Yeah, sorry. Hello.
We have a chap there. We could get
Hello.
a microphone just for that gentleman there. Just wait for the mic there, sir.
Hi Mary, I was wondering if you think people will always have a need for the kind of psychological and social interaction that retail provides, or will the internet take over completely with AI?
No, I think, and I'm not, completely and utterly, there will always be that need. In fact, the better people do it, the greater that need will come. So even if you think about, what I talked about, the pure players who are doing really well, you take Warby Parker in the States, Bonobos, the men's ones, they were selling online. Warby Parker, did glasses, Bonobos menswear, and they opened up, they realised that whilst men were going online and choosing their gear, they couldn't quite get the big sale they needed. And that actually what men really needed was someone to say to them, that looks good on you, and just to talk with them. And so they opened up all these showrooms, which have been hugely successful for it. And it's that confidence thing. And most of us, especially when we're buying fashion, lack confidence. And people still need that. Then there's the social experience. A lot of food shopping hasn't understood that, and a lot of them have started to understand that by putting service. And that's one of the things that Tesco's did. You went in there, yes, it was cheap, but everybody grunted at you. And they were grunting not because they were rude, it's because they weren't being looked after either. And then you started to walk into Waitrose, and Waitrose always walked you to the place. There was this kind of general joy that was in it. And people actually enjoyed going in and doing food shopping, even though, of course, it would have been easier to have Ocado deliver it, because there were people there guiding you, there were people there talking to you, and it was a place that felt light and lovely. And what's the first thing that Tesco's invested in? Staff and their people and looking after them. And we're humans, and we're neurobiologically wired to connect. We're not neurobiologically wired to sit in our room and go, I'll have that one. That is what we're, and that is really important. Here's the other thing, which is a statistic. If you get people into bricks and mortar retailing, you have a 70% chance more that they will buy something else that they didn't think they were going to buy. But the future of that will be as well that a lot of the stores, I don't mean to turn my back to you, so I do. A lot of the stores will be about becoming kind of media spaces where people will interact. So we're Sign and Digital, where they'll be doing reviews. So you'll be having kind of ambassadors rather than salespeople in the stores that are representing those brands, but you'll be able to read reviews online, you'll be able to have those within the shelves. If I was digital businesses, that's what I'd be looking at. So you're buying a bottle of wine, wouldn't it be fantastic if you were able to read online people's reviews in the way that the Vivino app does that? Get that in store. People still want to be in those places where they feel that they're just taking their time, and there's lovely music, and there's lovely smell, and they're tasting a bit of wine, sometimes a bit too much when it's my missus on a Friday night in our local off license, but nevertheless, it connects and it makes you feel part of something. And that will never go away. It will go away when people do it badly. Mothercare, Toys R Us, not good enough.
All right, terrific, good stuff.
Gentleman in the front end.
Yeah, the microphone.
Jane with the mic, she's running up the middle.
Hi Mary, I'm a manufacturer of a new material.
Of what?
A new textile material, self-adhesive transparent textile. I wonder where, let's say, the top retail designers are going to look for new materials. Where is the inspiration coming from?
Well, anything, always, I can tell you in retail, it's all about, nicking other people's ideas. Retailers are never the first. People think they are, but they're not. Retailers only go where there's a crowd. You go back to the original part of retailing, it was the Greek agora. There's a crowd, someone came along and thought, oh, I'll sell something here, and that's what we do. Really, a lot of it will be through interiors, will be through the arts world, will be through hotels. So I think always, if I was you, I'd be definitely trying to get myself into a lot of the interiors magazines. The Architectural Digest, into World of Interiors, visually stimulating places where they'll be doing it. Content, doing great content online digitally where people read great content. I think that's desperately important. Places like this going on now, the D&AD Awards, where they're just looking at design and art direction, that's real incredible innovative creativity. So wherever creative sources are, making sure you try and get your brand at the heart of that and being tangential in how you approach it and not being literal, because discovery is also a very sexy thing. People like to think they've discovered something, and trying to control things often just nullifies creativity.
Terrific. Okay.
Let me chap there, and then
another chap here. Is the last question?
Last question.
Okay, last question.
Better be good.
No pressure, sir, no pressure.
No
That's a
pressure.
bit
If you want to change your question, that's
Hi,
fine.
Mary.
Hello.
I was just wondering, I was really interested in when you were talking about turning, say, high streets and shopping malls into these sort of social spaces and experiences for people. And obviously, this is a conference about printed media and signage and that sort of thing. So I was just wondering how those kind of materials can help sort of contribute to the creation of those spaces.
Oh, I think, that's a kind of a no-brainer. It's a given. I mean, I've worked with Westfield now, which Westfield came over to the UK in 2007. I think all these ballsy Australians, when we were about to hit the crash, and they were opening up one of the biggest shopping malls ever. And what we said to them was just stop talking about shopping malls, talk about destinations where people would say, I'm going to spend my Saturday afternoon there. Once you start to think like that, it's like creating a home. Who wants to go in with the bare floorboards and nothing on the wall? Or who wants to go in and see some beautiful wallpaper and there's a nice cup of tea brewing and you're standing on something that's soft under feet? It's understanding the sensual experience. And that is the most important thing. So wayfinding is hugely important. One of the things I did when I did Westfield is I got in all these incredible leaders within their field. So from Tom Dixon, who's one of the best, lighting installers, Tracy Emin on art. So we put art in the loos by Tracy, and she picked tomorrow's young artists to do it. It's putting all the old codes on its head. That's what would inspire you, and asking yourself why you would do that. So what would you do? What would you want to walk into? A bland marble environment that's cold? Or a beautiful digital screen that has great content on it that tells you something? And it might not be selling you something, it might be poetry. It might be Gillian Waring doing an installation in the middle of Euston Station with someone just dancing. That's art, that's an artist. Why don't we bring that into retail instead of the boringness that we tell you what a price is? Who wants to hear that? People want to be inspired, and the byproduct from that is that you buy. God, I've been doing this for 25 years saying this, and it's so surprising how many retailers still don't do it. There was a reason Harvey Nichols floated and made so much money. We made a destination. We made a place where people want to hang out. I remember asking some women when they went in the door, when I'd put Thomas Heatherwick, who's now one of the greatest, what would he describe? Architects, I guess. But he was straight out of college, and I said, "Oh, mate, do a window for me." Incredible installation that we did. And I remember saying to these women as they went in, "What do you think about that?" And they said, "Oh, I don't know, but I feel really sexy when I come and shop in here." They had no idea what it was. But somehow, being in this place that was vibrant and had art at the centre of it, and creativity, made them feel sexy, even if they came in and bought, a Max Mara shirt.
Terrific. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that Mary could easily carry on a lot longer. However, we have run out of time. Thank you very much for coming, but most of all, thank you today for our guest. Please put a round of applause together for Mary Portas.
Thank you.